20 years ago, the United States built a military prison on the naval base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Since then, it's been used to hold what the U.S. government calls enemy combatants from the War on Terror. Catamount Arts was honored to host art from Guantanamo Bay during the 20th anniversary. The exhibit features nearly 100 evocative works made by 6 men, all of whom have been since cleared for release, although 2 remain in detention. The bulk of the exhibit, curated by Erin Thompson, was hung at the Fried Family Gallery, located at Catamount Arts, with a small selection on display at the Vermont Arts Council's Spotlight Gallery in Montpelier. The exhibit itself is evocative, but it's the local tie to the camp that really brings this particular story directly home. Northeast Kingdom attorney David Sleigh and Leslie Gensburg joined artist and former detainee Mansoor Adayfi live from Serbia in a panel discussion at Catamount Arts on June 26th, facilitated by Art from Guantanamo Bay curator Erin Thompson. Featured in the exhibit at the Fried Family Gallery was a single watercolor painting by Abdul Zahir, a former detainee represented by Bob Gensburg. Bob Gensburg and David Sleigh were among a handful of Vermont attorneys who volunteered to represent detainees held at Guantanamo Bay Prison. The watercolor was a gift to Bob and David. Art from Guantanamo Bay has generated widespread press coverage from around the world, resulting in the creation of a prohibition against the removal of artwork from the prison. The 2017 policy forbids Guantanamo Bay detainees from even showing artwork to their lawyers, and lawyers' notes describing artwork are classified. Some of the art is signed by the numbers used to identify detainees rather than their names, and some bear stamps reading "Approved by U.S. Forces," signifying clearance for release to attorneys before all prisoner artwork was deemed property of the U.S. government, destined to be confiscated and destroyed. Perhaps ironically, the original exhibit, Ode to the Sea, was the impetus for the embargo on art created in Guantanamo Bay. Prior to the exhibition and the resulting international attention, the Pentagon allowed detainees to share artwork through their attorneys. Ode to the Sea and its updated, expanded current incarnation, Art from Guantanamo, have exhibited throughout the U.S., although none of the artists, even if they do leave GTMO, will see it. They are not permitted to set foot on American soil. Everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Molly Stone, and I'm the artistic director at Catamount Arts, and recently I have been put in charge, or not in charge, but I'm the new gallery director. Outgoing gallery director Catherine French has been mentoring me and will continue so no one needs to get nervous. She's just a phone call away. So I wanted to thank her first and foremost tonight before we start, because she has walked myself and us through this whole process of getting this exhibit up in our gallery. So Catherine French, she is not here tonight, but she is with me and all of us here at Catamount. So a big thanks to her to begin with. So before we start, I wanted to give you a couple logistics. So there's a restroom right down the ramp, and you'll be able to find it. If you can't, Martin will assist. And we will have the panel discussion and some questions here. And then after that, we'll have a reception in the gallery where we will have some snacks and some wine and some artisan cheese out there as well. So just something to look forward to. Oh, and chocolate chip cookies, by the way. I'm looking at my children in the back. And there are other folks to thank. First off, curator Erin Thompson, who is behind me, and I'll have her introduce herself and the panel in a moment. But also Sam Monaco, who is the exhibition manager, who was also on all the Zoom calls that led up to this. This was a lot of work between a lot of people to make this happen. And I'd also like to point out that our guest, who is zooming in from Serbia tonight, has written a book, and it is here in my hand, but you can get your own copy at Boxcar and Caboose in St. Jay or at Green Mountain Bookstore in Lyndonville. And also I'd like to thank Erica Heilman for doing the Rumble Strip program, the podcast that you can go and re-listen to, and that is an interview with Erin about the artwork. And also Vermont Public, formerly known as Vermont Public Radio. They have rebranded They actually rebranded on the day that we had all of our content up on their website, which was really great, actually. So Vermont Public did Vermont Edition, all about Guantanamo Bay, the 20th anniversary. And these folks behind me, Leslie and David, were on that program. And that will be archived and available in a couple of weeks, so you can listen to that too. And just to end, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Catamount Arts. All of us have put in so much work to make this happen. And I'm going to hand it over to Erin.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. So I'm a professor at John Jay College of the City University of New York. And this show that you're seeing outside is the third installation, the second expanded installation of a show that first went up in 2017 in New York City, shortly after I got a call from a lawyer, Beth Jacob, who said, my clients at Guantanamo are making art, and I thought, what in the world are you talking about? They're making art at Guantanamo Bay. She invited me to her office. This is a schmancy midtown conference room with some ships made by Moeth Al-Alwi. And she explained that shortly after Obama took office, there became an official art making class with sort of standard art class exercises, definitely not standard conditions. Detainees were strip searched and then made art while shackled to the floor. And sort of their art was shaped by what was around them, what they could or could not see. Here is an artist whose work is in the show, Mohammed Al-Anzi, painting some of the contents of his cell. But other artists did what they could do. This is an artist, Harun Gul, who learned to draw by copying this photograph, the only photograph he had of his daughter, over and over and over again. And he was just released this last week, I believe. So when I first started looking at this art, I thought, why are there all of these ships? This is one of the model ships made out of scraps of plastic from shampoo bottles, and the cording is from an unraveled prayer mat and prayer cap. Here's a little bottle cap as the ship's wheel, which actually connects to the rudder with cables made out of dental floss. And there are all these paintings of the sea as well, just painting after painting, drawing after drawing. And I eventually, to figure out why all these sea images, asked Mansoor Adayfi, who's with us here today, who spent nearly 15 years in Guantanamo before being cleared and released. And he ended up writing an essay for the show's catalog, which was published in the New York Times as an essay called Our Prison on the Sea. So he's asked me to read a little bit of that essay to introduce him, and then I've asked Leslie and David to also pick an artwork from the show and then talk to you for a couple of minutes to introduce their connection to Guantanamo through that show, and then we'll open it up for questions. I have questions written down, but I would much rather hear your questions, so please cue them up so that we can ask them. All right, so here's a little from Mansoor's essay. And here's the landscape that he is talking about. After the plane landed, a bus took us to a ferry, and beneath it we felt the sea. We were tired, hungry, in pain, and in fear. We were gagged, blindfolded, and shackled. We were dragged from the ferry to our cages. When we arrived at our cages, we whispered to one another, "There is a sea around." We could feel it despite all of the pain, confusion, and fear. When we arrived, the first thing we wanted to know was our location. As Muslims, we pray 5 times a day, and we must face the Holy Kaaba in Mecca. The direction towards Mecca was impossible to determine when we first got to Guantanamo. Detainees started to consider the facts available, the weather, the birds, the sea. Then, anything that might tell us about our location, even dreams. One detainee said, "Based on my dream, we are in Oman." Some guessed we were in India because the pipes that held up our cell's fences had "Made in India" written on them. Finally, after many months, some detainees who were arrested after Guantanamo was known about were finally brought in. They told us that we are in Cuba, in Guantanamo. Some of us might have heard of Cuba, but never Guantanamo. All we knew about there was the sea. Some of the camps in Guantanamo were closer to the sea than others. After a few months, we were moved from Camp X-Ray to Camp Delta, which was closer to the sea, but we weren't allowed to see it. The many fences around us were covered with green tarp to block us from seeing the sea. Years passed, and we missed everything in our lives. It was hard not seeing the sea, despite it being only a few hundred feet away from us. At the recreation area, if we lay on our stomach, we could get glimpses of the sea through small openings below the tarp. When the guards found out, they blocked the openings. In some cells, in some blocks, we could stand on the windows at the back of our cells to see the sea, but that was risky because the guards punished us every time they saw us looking out. Whenever any of us wanted to look at the sea, we needed to ask one of the other detainees to watch for the guards and warn us if they came to the block. It wasn't long before the administration made higher covers, blocking us from seeing the sea. When we asked why, we were told it was for safety and security. But something happened in 2014 that let most of us finally see the sea. News that a hurricane was headed towards Cuba caused camp administration to take down the green tarps that blocked us from seeing. The detainees looked so happy when the guards started to take down the covers. We all faced in one direction, towards the sea. It felt like a little freedom to look at it. The tarps remained down for a few days, and then detainees started making art about the sea. Some wrote poems about it, and everyone who could draw drew the sea. I could see different meanings in each drawing, color, and shape. I could see the detainees put their dreams, feelings, hopes, and lives in them. I could see some of the drawings were mixtures of hope and pain. That the sea means freedom no one can control or own, freedom for everyone. Each of us found a way to escape to the sea. Those of us who could see the sea spent most of their time watching, listening, and looking at that big blue color which cooled our souls. The sea was a little rough because of the weather. Huge waves rose high and hit the land. Looking at the sea like that was scary, but that was what we got, and it felt good. Those days without the tarps were like a vacation. On the last day, the sea looked refreshed, calm, and lovely. A huge ship sailed close by. Detainees called out to one another to look at the ship. We kept looking at it like something magic would happen and all of us would be freed. But the ship just disappeared. The next day, the workers returned and blocked our sight. David, you chose this work.
I did. It's hard for me to figure out exactly if that's a person behind what looks like a dead or dying tree or what it is. And that's consistent with the whole design of Guantanamo, was to alienate everyone there from everything else. And so that this painting, and I would never be presumptuous enough to even imagine what it was like to be a prisoner there, but to even wonder, sure, to even wonder whether you were a full person anymore, day in and day out. I know Bob Gensburg, in my experience representing Abdul Zahir over the years, was full of various false hopes and disappointments. And Zahir himself literally lost his mind at one period from just being constantly tantalized with the idea that someday he might get out. And of all the pictures that I saw, this was the one that made me think of what Guantanamo meant, which was just to rob everyone of every aspect of their own individuality.
I just have to interrupt and say David seemed very reluctant when I told him to look at a piece of art and then talk about it, and just deliver something incredibly eloquent and moving, so thank you, thank you. Yeah.
She told me the one thing not to talk about is the only thing I know, which is about the law, so
And Leslie, would you tell us about this artwork?
Well, this picture,
you gotta.
pardon? Oop. It's on. This picture was a gift to Bob from Abdul Zahir, the prisoner he represented. And the date on it is 2016. And he explained to Bob that the corner down here, you can make out a cactus, and that represents Guantanamo. Then the rowboat represents Abdul Zahir being rowed out to have his hearing after 14 years on the battleship with the American flag, and that represents the American government. And then he gets his freedom, and Captain Bob and Captain Dave sail him home.
All right, Mansoor, I'm going to start with you, asking you a question. Can you unmute yourself and then tell us your thoughts on why writing and painting was so important to help you and your brothers survive Guantanamo? Oh, you're still muted though.
Am I still muted now?
You're good, thank you.
Okay. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا هلا ومرحبا، أرحب وحياكم الله، حياكم الله. أهلا وسهلا مليون، يا هلا ومرحبا، أهلا وسهلا. First of all, I would like to welcome you all, and thank you so much for being here today or tonight, wherever. And before I start, I would like to extend my thanks, or our thanks and appreciation to our dear friend, Erin Thompson. I mean, without her effort and work, we couldn't be talking today, honestly. So I remember like in 2016, I was talking to my lawyer about the art, and she said, I'm going to find someone to exhibit it. So I was introduced to Erin for the first time. And since then, she's keeping like inspiring me and pushing me, and always like, I have an idea, so okay, go for it. I'm going to fly to Guantanamo, guys. Would like to have an orange jumpsuit, or just without? So, art from Guantanamo, either writing or singing or dancing or even imagining, because at Guantanamo, imagination was also a form of art at Guantanamo. When everything has been taken away from you, but you have only your heart and your mind, so you escape to your imagination. It becomes like a way of, it becomes like your place where you paint, where you write, where you dance, where you cry, where you escape, wherever. Writing, and especially art at Guantanamo, start at early years, at the day we arrived, or the month we arrived at Guantanamo, because when we arrived at Guantanamo, we had no shared life with each other. 15 nationalities, over 20 languages spoken, and there is no connection at all. So also the language was barrier. Plus the rules, you are not allowed to talk, stand, to pray, even to look at the guards. That's so crazy, subhanAllah. We started little by little, I remember we started like using either like the plastic spoon or the stem of the apple and the styrofoam, like shape heart or sun or moon, or any kind of, people try to distract themselves, but it was a way, it was more than that. I'll explain later. Then when we become like start introducing it to each other, we start singing. So we have one of the Guantanamo songs. Would like to hear it? Are you sure? Like, I don't have a good voice. It's like a form of torture. So basically we start sing Guantanamo song, which is well known actually. It's called If Anyone Come to Guantanamo or Came from the Interrogation or Leave Guantanamo or Leave the Block, we would sing for them. Like when someone came, we would say حبا حبا باللي جاء باللي جاء يا مرحبا باللي جاء باللي جاء. When someone leaving, like either leave Guantanamo or leave the to the block or the torture, whatever, so we'd say روح روح مع السلامة الله يزيدك أمن وسلامة. Basically this was our first way, try to resist at Guantanamo, try to break from the heavy rules and the mistreatment. It was started with the singing. Then brother started composing poets, a lot of poets, and we didn't have nothing to write, so we depended in our memories, and those poets become also songs later on. So in One Black, you could hear a song in many languages. We had like one night, Saturday or whatever in a week, different blocks. We would sing in Arabic, in English, in Pashtun, French, in many languages. Poetry, reciting poetry, stories, dancing, also dance. So someone talked about the individuality at the beginning. You know the trait that make us who we are as individual, unique person, like lovely Erin Thompson. So what makes us like a unique as individual? Those traits are our faith, belief, values, morals, ethics, experience, memories, knowledge, relationship, your name. So when you arrive at Guantanamo, they tried to take all of that. We became just a number. I was like, detainee 441. What? So, I mean, totally, they try to strip you who you are. Everything. So you are not allowed to do anything. Everything, you have to follow orders. So where I came from, like a tribal background, rebellious, and like a free spirit, I said, I'm not following the order. It doesn't make any sense. Didn't make any sense. This is so wrong. So we started from there then. Start like,
okay, Mansoor, I know you just said you don't follow any orders, but we got some questions, so.
Okay, I will, okay, then, okay.
I'll, like, wrap it up.
Okay.
And, because everybody's
okay, Erin.
to talk.
Okay, so.
I know,
okay.
I know and love Mansoor, and he could go for the next 5 hours, and it'd be utterly fascinating. But this is a
Okay, I'll wrap. So Art Guantanamo, in short words, become a survival way, a way to escape Guantanamo. Art in Guantanamo connect us to ourselves, to our memories, to our life, to the world outside. Because when we stay at Guantanamo, the more you stay, the more you are distanced from who you are, from your memories, from your relationship, from your life. So when you start painting in 2010, actually we painted the things we missed most. The things that we bit like, because our memories start fading away. We started painting for our memories, connected to ourselves, to our memories, to the world. Art from Guantanamo is a living being, one of us. It's not just an art. It's like we consider it a living being. Art from born at Guantanamo. Some of the art managed to be freed, and some of the art still at Guantanamo. So now we and Art from Guantanamo are fighting to free the captive art from Guantanamo. Sorry for taking so long, guys.
No, I'm just trying to get them to buy your book. Don't forget us here. Lost and Found at Guantanamo is Mansoor's fabulous memoir. And you can see behind him are the Post-its in which he's planning out future projects, which I cannot wait to read. All right, questions, please.
Do you feel the guards believed that those rules made sense? Or were they just following orders, or were they sadistic bastards?
Mansoor, someone asked, do you think that the guards believed that the rules made sense at Guantanamo that they were enforcing, or were they just following orders, or were they sadistic bastards?
You know, honestly, not only the prisoners at Guantanamo were victims of Guantanamo. There was detainees, guards, camp staff. You know, some of the guards actually tried to refuse to follow the orders, but they had no choice. Some of them demoted, some of them actually were kicked out from Guantanamo. Some of them, you know, followed the rules, and later on they would come apologize to us for what's going on there. So Guantanamo is a place a machine that crush they crush our humanity basically. And being at Guantanamo, your humanity will be tested. So we're not just the victims of Guantanamo, like also guards and camp staff. Even those who follow the orders and abuse us, they were also victims of Guantanamo.
Yeah, at the panel discussion when the show first opened, Mansoor talked, and then afterwards someone came up to me who said that he had been a guard at Guantanamo, and he's like, I remember that guy, but I never knew his name. I just knew his number. And so I told you, Mansoor, about this, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy. Tell him I finally got that Taylor Swift CD that we kept talking about there. All right, I saw another hand.
Yeah, I looked at the art exhibit a little bit before we came into the auditorium here, and I noticed there were quite a few pictures of sandy desert with cliffs. And I kind of wondered if those were memories from back at home, or were they copies from magazine pictures or whatever? What was the source of those desert cliff pictures?
So there's a lot of pictures of sandy deserts with cliffs. A lot of those are actually from source material in National Geographic, which was one of the only sort of image-heavy magazines available to detainees. And there's also, there's less in this show, but there's more in the other images I've collected of like little log cabins in the snow and Monument Valley and this sort of dream of America produced in this very strange way and strange place. I did want to ask you two, because I know that you faced a lot of criticism and sort of outrage, even on Vermont Public the other day, for representing Guantanamo detainees. Could you tell us more about that? And especially Leslie has a wonderful story about phones being tapped.
Go ahead.
The phone, you have to keep in mind, these were plain old landlines, no other kind. We lived outside of Lyndonville, and Bob worked in St. Johnsbury, 15 miles away. So it was two different exchanges, completely different exchanges. One day, first we had some trouble with our home phone, and the phone company had worked on it. And one day the phone rang, and I picked it up at home, and I could hear Bob talking to a client. I could tell it was in his office. And I said, hello, hello, and he obviously couldn't hear me, and he and this client continued their conversation, so I hung up. He came home that night, and I told him about it, and he said, I had that conversation with my client. Our phone is tapped. He knew immediately. He then, through all kinds of ways, found that their office computers were hacked, and they hired a forensic techie who I think had worked for the FBI doing this kind of thing. And he said, yes, indeed, everything is tapped, hacked into. And these are his private law clients. He had to notify all his clients that what they thought was private was not, and that the government had access to it. Amazingly, I have to say, not a single client said, goodbye, we're going somewhere safer. That was very nice. But that was pretty shocking. Dave, you must have something.
Well, I guess. I mean, there was one caller on the Vermont Public thing who said, in essence, you know, what are you doing representing these people? They must have done something horrible to be there. Why do you care so much? First of all, the premise was false. I mean, lots of people who were there didn't do a darn thing. Our client in particular, finally, after 14 years, when he had a chance to fully vet the facts at the hearing, the government ultimately admitted he was there as a case of mistaken identity, and that he hadn't done any of the things that he'd been accused of for over 14 years. I'd have to say, though, by and large, at least within the profession, I think people respected what Bob and I and others were doing. It was frustrating. It was a lot of hard work, travel and accommodations that wouldn't generate 1 star on any rating system. But I think, you know, Well, not a lot of people were signing up for it. I think most people thought it was important work to do.
Speaking of accommodations, one of my friends from law school, Alka, Pradhan, works in the military commissions in defense and has had a long-term clients at detained at Guantanamo who likes to make her things that they can eat while they're having legal conferences, and including once he came with cheese, and she's like, how in the world did you make cheese? He's like, oh, it's easy, you just take some milk, you strain it through a sock, it's a clean sock, and she's like, okay. So suffering that you didn't think you'd have to encounter as a lawyer. Other questions? Yeah?
I'm really intrigued how there was nothing, and then all of a sudden they decided to allow the detainees to practice art. So I'm curious about how that actually originated, like whose idea, and also was there a teacher? And if so, what were they like?
Mansoor, I'm going to ask you to talk about the teacher in 1 second, but just to talk about the, because there's a question from the audience about what the art teacher was like. But just to clarify, as Mansoor alluded to in his first answer, the detainees began to make art as soon as they arrived. They would do things like they got served tea in styrofoam cups, and they would take the stem of an apple and press it into the styrofoam to sort of carve the styrofoam. And then those objects would be thrown away immediately, but it was still an impulse to create. So the art making class was almost a turning official of something that had been happening for a long time, although at first it was very much an announcement of we are making conditions better without much substance. So they were given like crayons and computer paper. So it was only after years of protest by detainees and their lawyers that they were given the art supplies that you see them being able to use in the objects here, oil pastels, watercolor, etc. So Mansoor, could you tell us about who taught the classes and what they were like?
So the actual classes started in 2010 after we call it the Black House. Sorry, I'm not a racist, but I said, when you read the book, you'll understand the story behind it. So when Obama failed to close Guantanamo, they tried to make it look little good. So we were on force feeding hunger strikes. So then we started negotiating with the camp administration about improving the living condition of the camp. It's just like, imagine, in less 2 months, everything had changed. Yesterday they were like, you are killers, the worst of the worst. The other day, how are you, sir? Good morning, sir, and shake hands. So what's going on with these guys? And communal living and 20 hours free. Then we start working toward the art classes. First of all, it was just pen and paper. Then we had to fight for the art teacher. We get like a nice Iraqi art teacher. He has a Ph.D. in art. He was really keen. He was nice, and he wants us. I mean, he was one of the people who treated us in a humane way at Guantanamo, and he was really want us to learn how to paint. So we fought together to get like the colors, the art materials, and so on, and we take it from there.
More questions? You again?
Have they continued doing art, the ones who were at home?
Mansoor, there's a question of have people continued doing art, and I'll answer it if you have anything to add. Yes and no. So some, like Sabri Al-Karashi, whose work is in the show, have continued to do a lot of work. He's been placed in Kazakhstan, which is super miserable. But he's sort of trying to make a new home for himself by entering into art competitions, by having his art shown in local shows, by embracing this activity or this identity as an artist. And some have found it too painful to continue making art, like Mohammed Al-Anzi. But I just heard from Mansoor like last week that Mohammed Ansi wants to start making art again. So maybe everybody's minds can change.
Yes, some of the brothers they have difficulties to making arts because they get busy with their life, with their families. Some of them like financial issues, they couldn't afford to buy the art materials and so on. But Sabri still like he really live in a miserable situation, have no legal status, and so he started finding himself, you know, find his sanity with making art. Now he had around like 500 painting, and it's amazing. And he won some kind of like awards and so on. And his art become even way better, but he started painting about Guantanamo. Was like, I feel like you have to paint about Guantanamo again. Now he's going to start again. So because it's not easy for everyone to relive the moment of Guantanamo. I am the only crazy person who's talking about Guantanamo every single day.
Mansoor is sort of like the hub of former detainees, so he keeps asking people, like, am I remembering this correctly or that correctly? And he says that a lot of people are like, why are you still thinking about that? Stop it. You and then you.
I'm just curious how exact your communication was with back home in Iraq or wherever. That is, were you ever able to get or send letters from your family back home? Did they know where you were or have any idea what had happened to you when you disappeared? And did you have any email or use of computers and stuff like that?
Mansoor, what was your communication like with your family like at Guantanamo? Did you get letters back and forth? Were you ever able to use emails? I know the answer to this one.
Maybe secretly email through aliens. I mean, you Guantanamo upside down world. And my family didn't hear about me until 2007. Although, the way they heard they knew I was in Guantanamo. One of the prisoners left in 2006, and I told them, please visit my aunt and son until until I'm here. It's the way how my family knew I was in Guantanamo. It was we started communicating with our families 2011. We get like phone calls. We get video phone calls regularly. Yes.
I'm wondering about the relationship among the prisoners during the time you were there and also once you left. It sounds like you stayed in contact with some of them and you got sort of like this community of ex-detainees. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Is there a community of former detainees, Mansoor? And what's that relationship like versus the relationship among you when you were there?
You know, at Guantanamo, I used to be an instigator, a leader, commander to some extent. I used to fight for the brothers at Guantanamo. Some of us were the tip of the spear, hunger strike, fighting, and so on. So after Guantanamo, I'm doing the same thing. I am now work as part-time with the Cage advocacy organization. I work in they have a Cage Guantanamo project. So I track we work for the closure of Guantanamo. Also, I work on tracking the brothers who have problems out after Guantanamo. They have like legal issues, health issues, and other issues. So we have like 3 WhatsApp groups, and I am in contact with a lot of the brothers. I think last year, yes, guys, I finished my university. Guess what? My thesis was about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees into social life and the labor market. Nothing exists basically. So based on that, alhamdulillah, we managed to establish some kind of organization which is called Guantanamo Survival Fund, try to help them somehow because governments abandoned their role in helping those prisoners to integrate into the society and to build their life. So now I'm helping this organization to help the brothers who have their difficulties. Basically, Guantanamo forged some kind of really strong friendship and brotherhood. Some of the prisoners moved on with their life, they don't communicate with anyone. But mostly we're still communicating and talking, helping each other. Some of the brothers, they need they need to talk. They need someone to talk to. They need someone who can trust, someone they know them and so on, yeah.
I have a question. Those who were sent to Oman, It's my understanding that the Omani government does not let them communicate with anyone outside of the country. Do you have any way of contacting these people or know anything about how they are?
Yeah, we have WhatsApp group. Like many of them in the group with us. We have actually one of the group we are suing one of the database companies. They include our name in their blacklist. So I talked to all the brothers because I helped in translating and so on. Actually, Oman, one of the countries who actually have a good program, but they had to, the brothers who were registered in Oman signed paper, then they won't talk to journalists or media and so on. But and we communicate between us, like as former Guantanamo prisoners.
Mansoor once told me that his nickname from the guards was Smiley Troublemaker. You can definitely see how that is true. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what factors were significant in who got released? Was it law? Was it whether they had been tortured? Whether it was the political situation? Whether it was the media? What kinds of things? Some people got out, some people didn't. And what were the significant factors that determined that?
Except for the 40 or so people who remain, who have either been charged with crimes, and there are trials or procedures leading up to trials that are going on now, and then a group of a subset of that 40 who the government has said they're going to detain forever and not try. People were let go for reasons that were completely unpredictable. So I ended up representing 3 detainees. The one I represented with Bob Abdul Zahir was one of the 11 that were charged in the initial military commissions because they thought he was a really big player, a bad guy. When those commissions were essentially vacated by the Supreme Court, Zahir was never tried and he wasn't released until really the bitter end. I represented another detainee, Kandin Kadir, who was a pharmacist and who was captured when somebody traded him for a CIA bounty. I actually went down to see him, made all the arrangements, and the arrangements are just ridiculous. I mean, it took a month to be able to get everything in line to go. And I landed on the island and I was told by the guards that he'd left. So how those decisions were made, completely opaque.
I'd like to read something that Bob's and your prisoner, Abdul Zahir, wrote in September of 2016. He said, "In the name of God, most gracious and most merciful, to President Obama and all his ministers, to any person who has heart and any person who has human feeling. I have been in Guantanamo for 14 years. I am that person who was arrested instead of another person. I am already cleared for release. I simply want my freedom as soon as possible. Please send me back to my country or any other country. If not, then send my wishes to my family, then send me to the grave. Enough is enough. Enough to languishing in Guantanamo. Enough to the injustice."
So just what's implicit in that is that we had this hearing in June of 2016. We got the decision in July of 2016 that Zahir had been cleared for release. When he wrote that letter to Bob, it was September. He was languishing there, waiting. He actually went wheels up January. It was 4 days before Trump's inauguration. And Trump had said that no one else was leaving the island. And Bob and Leslie and I were literally biting our fingernails to find out whether, we were afraid midair that the president was going to say, turn that plane around and bring him back. And then we got word sometime later that he had been safely transported to Oman.
This I found, this was written, an email to Bob. Bob had given him a laptop to use when he left. And this was on January 27th, 2017. This is the last time any of us have heard from him. He said, "Mr. Bob, I am in learning camp now, and here we are not allowed to connect with you or with other person. Please, I will connect you after 3 months and pray to God for your best health. Thanks, your sincere friend, Abdul Zahir."
It's really a continuing injustice because the lives of even those whom were officially declared to have been arrested for mistaken identity, had to have done nothing, are still, they're surveilled for the rest of their lives, not allowed to choose where they live, etc. Mansoor, for example, is a citizen of Yemen, but is now being sort of forced to live in Serbia that's his memoir part 2, is everything that has happened post Guantanamo, and sometimes he tells me he wants to go back because it's so bad.
I've been wondering about that. How did they choose these locations? Rather than sending people back to their home countries, why choose these other countries, seemingly at random, maybe it's not random, but why the countries they're being put in?
Some people weren't repatriated because it would be simply too dangerous for them to return. There were a lot of mixed loyalties, and bringing somebody back and dropping them off in their village could have been fatal. But I think that was a small subset of the reasons. I mean, there were really complicated negotiations between quasi-allies of the United States, people who were willing to take them so that the administration, the Obama administration, would avoid the strongest sort of pushback. Okay, so we're not releasing these people to go rejoin the war on terror, even if they've never joined it in the first place. We're sending them to Oman that has this program, this learning camp and this surveillance, and we're not really letting them go in the sense that you should worry about. So it was difficult, and the Omanis, I'm sure, extracted, diplomatic benefits in some way for taking these people. But it was enormously frustrating.
We'll do 3 more, so make it snappy. You, and then you to close up.
Yeah, I'm just curious about what your life was like back in the Middle East before the war, and you were caught in the dragnet that wound up at Guantanamo. What was your job when you were working? Did you have family? And why were you caught in the dragnet? Were you carrying a gun or fighting from one side or the other?
I'm going to answer this because this is like several chapters of Mansoor's book, which you, again, should read. But he grew up in the mountains of Yemen. He was a shepherd, so I've been telling him that now his art is hanging in prime sheep territory in the U.S. He never carried a gun. He was traveling in Afghanistan and was essentially sold for a bounty as someone who was a helpless traveler who couldn't protest. So the American authorities were offering large rewards for turning in anyone who was an Al-Qaeda fighter or could pass for one for long enough to have the reward collected.
Just to interrupt, they were literally dropping leaflets from planes that said, for $3,000, turn us in a Taliban member. That's how Condon got picked up. Without telling you the whole long story, he had gone to France when he was young, got a degree in pharmacy, came back to Afghanistan, and for serial governments was the representative of the Minister of Health in his village. So it's true. He worked for the Afghan government before the Russians, he worked for the Russian-sponsored government, he worked for the interim government, he worked for the Taliban government, all in the same capacity, basically administering inoculations in his village. And somebody turned him in for $3 grand.
I listened to the Vermont public interview, and they talked about when the show was going to open in New York City, the Trump administration found out about it and said they were going to burn the art. So I'm just wondering what that was all about, and also were you concerned about security for the art itself?
So Mansoor, I'll let you answer this question, which was about the reaction to this show. So all of of the art on the back side. It's now framed, but on the back side there's a stamp that says approved by U.S. forces. So it was all cleared to leave Guantanamo by censors who were like, is this flower a message to Al-Qaeda? No, okay, it's just a flower. So the detainees gave these things to their lawyers, and then I put them on display, and then the administration freaked out, like, oh no, the secret message all along was these are human beings, not monsters, or something. I don't know what the problem was, but they said no more art can leave Guantanamo, and what remains will be disposed of, maybe burned, was their answer to a question of what does disposing of mean? And this is, amazingly enough, still the policy. There has been one detainee who is allowed to leave, taking his art with him. The rest, it's still the official policy, no art can leave. Now, they can't even show, for a long time they couldn't even show their lawyers pictures of what they're working on. Now they can show their lawyers when their lawyers visit, but those notes are classified. So the lawyers can't tell, like me, what new art these artists who are cleared for release are making. So Mansoor has been keeping track of what the artists who are still there, like Cullen and Moath, are saying about their art. What do they want?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the funny part is the U.S. government is exhibiting art from at Guantanamo. They have a small art gallery for visitors, for journalists, for tours who visit Guantanamo. You know, our art's being exhibited to improve U.S. image, but when you exhibit the art out in public, the art they approve for release, they freaked out. So since 2017, the government stops art from leaving Guantanamo. Although like Sil Khalid and Mu'ad and Rabbani and Zakaria and others, they still producing art. After 2017, basically they stopped the art materials. Then they allow the prisoners to have. They ended the art teacher contract. So they didn't have like art teacher. They have only someone who was just watching there. And we have been working now trying to, we sent like last month, we sent a letter to the government asking them to let art to leave Guantanamo. Also now, I think Erin knows that I'm working on a campaign so we can go to the media to do some publicity that the government to release the art. I get some also message from from Guantanamo through the families that Khalid and Mu'ad, they said, if they refuse to let them to take their art, they won't leave Guantanamo, basically.
And Moath Alwi has said he'd actually rather his art leave than because as far as he's concerned, his life is over, but his art can carry the message. All right, there's one last question.
Well, my question was pretty much the same, but I just want to clarify that they thought there were hidden messages in the art. Is that ultimately or what? I mean, it's still.
God only knows is the answer to so much Guantanamo policy. But yes, highly scrutinized. My favorite part of the scrutiny was when they were making the styrofoam cup drawings. They threw them all the way at the end of the meal, but first censors had to look at all of them and really scrutinize. Like, is there some sign here? So Moath has told me, or not Moath, Mansoor has told me funny stories about the detainees getting together to like write secret code languages that were meaningless just to
mess with the guards.
Just to confuse them. It was so crazy because, you know, they would collect all the styrofoams and the colonel told they have like special place. They would put the styrofoams for each detainee in a bag. They will write the number and the dates and keep it there as evidence. Until they said they have like a large place full of this stuff. So also they would, you know, have special people in deciphering these messages or letters and so on. So everything there you write, you do, you scratch in your cell, cameras, photos, analyzing, and so on.
And remember too, this is during the early years at Guantanamo. So these detainees who are finding it in themselves to like mess with the guards are being actively tortured quite seriously and often. So sometimes it seems a little cheesy to me, but I often take inspiration from Mansoor and his brothers for resistance in this way. And just to close off, I take inspiration from lawyers too, and from other Americans who have protested, who had fought for rights of people who were framed as the worst of the worst, as monsters. And your husband passed away after the detainee he represented was freed, and the show is here at Catamount because after the show opened in New York, Leslie sent me an email telling me about the painting that she had, telling me about her husband, and last summer I went and visited and saw the painting and met you for the first time, and you told me about the message on your husband's tombstone. So I'm sorry, it might make me cry, much less you, but could you tell us what it says, because it's so beautiful?
Microphone.
This man, though some of you knew him, I don't know how to express it. The United States Constitution was the heart and soul of what he believed in. He carried a copy of the Bill of Rights in his wallet. And I wish you hadn't asked me this question. He told me what he wanted on his stone: his name, his dates, and lawyer. And that's what I did. I also added a little bit, because sometimes people say lawyer and it's a pejorative word. So someone had written a lovely note, and there were words in it that I liked, and it was, I can't say it exactly. Will, do you remember?
Not exactly.
My son right here. It says, he wrote, wanted lawyer, which I put, and then something about everything that is noble and fine in the profession. I would like to read this one letter. Abdul Zahir, their client, when Mansoor was talking about art and the fact that some of them had poetry, Abdul Zahir wrote a beautiful letter. It isn't poetry, it's prose, but it sure sounds like poetry. I had asked Bob if he could take a letter with him on one of his visits and give it to Abdul Zahir from me. And he said, write it and we'll see what happens. And they actually did allow the letter to be given to him. And I just wanted him to know that I was ashamed of my country and what they had done to all these people. And I wanted him to know not everybody was like that. And he wrote me back. And he said, best cordial greetings from the depth of my heart. I wish this letter finds you well, in good health, and with a life full of happiness and prosperity. I received your kind letter. I have no doubt that the U.S. is full of people, especially women, who carry a lovable and merciful heart like yours. I am also certain that the person or the people who do injustice to others can never represent the overwhelming majority who carry good hearts. They are like a rose tree, which carries a number of thorns, but also carries hundreds of roses that attract people by their beauty and pleasant fragrance. No one would dislike the rose tree because of these thorns. This is how I wanted to reply to your kind letter. And I thought, that's poetry, and this is no horrible terrorist.
Well, I hope we can look at this art and be inspired to be the roses on that tree of America. Thank you so much, Mansoor, Leslie, and Dave for joining us. Thank you.
very sobering. And I'm just so happy to have shared it all with you. And I wanted to say a special thank you to Erin for curating this. A very special thank you to Leslie. And we are honoring Bob in our gallery right now.
Thank you.
So you can see Bob's photo in there. You can see a photo of Abdul here as well. And read the words that are attached to those photos in there so we can get some more context. And David, thank you so much for coming and speaking on behalf of your client and this subject matter. I do want to thank also, you can see the work in our gallery now until August 21st. But you can also see the art hung at the Vermont Arts Council Gallery in Montpelier as well. So they came on board and wanted to be a satellite gallery for this exhibit. So it is stretched across the state, or at least to the middle of the state. So please go visit them and check out that artwork that is there. Also, a big thank you to Kingdom Access Television for recording this, and we will be putting together an entire documentary of the exhibit coming into the building and it being put up on the wall, and this panel as well. And so that will be archived forever. So thank you so much. Please go out and enjoy some refreshments, and you can continue to talk to our panelists out there as well and enjoy the artwork. Thank you so much.